I never thought I'd hear those words come out of my own child's mouth. On the day he was born, I promised him I would give him everything I had. My love, my time, my sacrifices, my whole life. And yet, years later, standing in front of me on his birthday, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "The best gift you could ever give me is to disappear from my life." For a moment, the world went silent. I could still hear the laughter in the background, the clinking of glasses, the chatter of his friends. But inside me, it was like time had stopped. My name is Margaret. I am a mother who raised her son with her own 2 hands. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and stayed up through endless nights just to make sure he had everything he ever wanted. And on this day, his special day, I thought maybe, just maybe, I would hear a simple thank you or even I love you. But instead, he wished me away like I was nothing. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even let my voice tremble. I simply smiled, turned my head slightly, and walked away. Because if my own son believed that my disappearance would be the best gift of all, then so be it. What he didn't know was that within 1 short hour, his entire life would come crashing down, and it wouldn't be me delivering the punishment. It would be the police. I can still see it all so clearly in my mind, as if it happened yesterday. The room, the decorations, the way the candles flickered on the cake. Every little detail has been burned into my memory. It was my son's birthday, and I had spent days preparing myself for it. Not preparing a party. Oh no, that was already taken care of by his wife and friends. But preparing my heart. Because every birthday of his, I used to hold on to the hope that maybe this would be the year he'd remember the mother who carried him into this world, the woman who gave up everything so he could stand tall. The house was crowded that night. Laughter echoed through the walls, glasses clinked, and the smell of expensive food filled the air. His friends were gathered around, dressed in their finest, and his wife flitted about like a queen hosting her royal ball. I had arrived quietly with a small gift in my hand, a gift that probably seemed modest compared to the extravagant packages piled high on the table. But to me, it wasn't about money. It was about meaning. Inside that small box was a watch that once belonged to his late father. I had kept it safe all these years, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. I thought, what better time than his birthday? What better way to remind him that his roots still mattered? But the moment I walked in, I felt it. The coldness. The way eyes turned toward me, not with warmth, but with a kind of pity mixed with annoyance. Some of his friends barely nodded, others pretended not to notice me at all. His wife offered me a smile so tight it looked painful. The kind of smile that hides resentment. She took my coat without a word and slipped it onto the hanger as if I were just another guest, not the woman who raised the man they were all here to celebrate. I found a seat at the edge of the room, near the kitchen doorway where the servers brushed past, carrying trays of food and drinks. Nobody asked me to join the main table. Nobody saved me a seat close to him. I watched from a distance as my son laughed with his friends, raising glasses of champagne, his smile wide and carefree. Every now and then his eyes would pass over me, but only for a second, as if I were no more important than the wallpaper on the wall. I tried not to let it hurt. I told myself, just being here is enough. Just seeing him happy is enough. But deep inside, a small ache grew heavier with every passing minute. When the cake was finally brought out, the room filled with cheers and music. The candles lit up his face, and for a brief moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the boy who once clung to my leg, who begged me never to leave his side, who cried into my chest when nightmares came. For a fleeting second, my heart softened, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this night would turn out differently. He blew out the candles and everyone shouted, "Make a wish!" He looked around the room, grinning, and then his eyes landed on me. For the first time that night, he acknowledged my presence. Everyone turned to see who he was staring at. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he'd thank me. Maybe he'd say something kind. Maybe he'd recognize the gift I had brought with trembling hands. But then he opened his mouth, and what came out of it shattered me. "The best gift," he said slowly, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, "would be if my mother disappeared from my life. That's all I want this year, just for her to finally let me live without her shadow." The room went silent for a moment, and then laughter. Actual laughter. His friends chuckled, some nervously, others openly, as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard. His wife smirked, covering her mouth with her hand like she was trying to hide her amusement. But me? I just sat there. My hands gripped the little box in my lap so tightly I thought it might break. My chest felt hollow, as if the air had been sucked out of it. My son, my only son, had just declared to the world that the best gift I could ever give him was my absence. For a moment, I thought I might cry. The tears burned hot behind my eyes, threatening to spill. But then something inside me shifted. A strange calm washed over me, like a wave smoothing out jagged rocks. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and forced the corners of my lips into a gentle smile. If this was the gift he wanted, then I would give it to him, but not in the way he thought. I didn't speak, I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I rose quietly from my seat, smoothed down my dress, and walked across the room. My footsteps echoed louder in my ears than the music playing in the background. I placed the small box, the watch that had belonged to his father, on the gift table, careful not to let my hands shake. And then, without a word, das, I turned and headed for the door. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked where I was going. In fact, it felt like the entire room exhaled in relief as I left, as if I were some unwanted burden finally being lifted away. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My heart was heavy, yes, but it was also strangely light, because in that moment I realized something. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. Sometimes walking away with dignity is stronger than shouting back in anger. And so I walked. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for him to call out my name because I knew he wouldn't. My son had made his wish, and I had granted it. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that within just one short hour, everything in his life was about to change. But that part of the story comes later. When I walked out of that house on his birthday, the night air pressing against my face, I couldn't help but drift back to the past, to the days when it was just him and me against the world. People in that room, laughing at his cruel words. They didn't know the road I had walked to get him there. They didn't see the nights I spent awake, the meals I skipped, the tears I shed in silence. They didn't know the cost of raising him alone, but I did. And every step of it came flooding back to me. I was young when I had him, younger than I should have been. His father, God rest his soul, was gone before my son could even say his name. That left me holding a tiny baby in my arms with no plan, no savings, and no help. The nights were the hardest. The world outside would fall asleep, but my world never did. He cried through fevers, through hunger, through loneliness, and I was the only one who could comfort him. There were times I'd sit in the rocking chair, cradling him against my chest, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I'll take care of you. I'll never let you down. You'll have a better life than this, I swear it. When he was just a toddler, I worked 2 jobs. One in the mornings at a diner pouring coffee for truckers who barely noticed me, and another at night, cleaning offices long after everyone else had gone home. I remember the smell of bleach on my hands, the ache in my back, and the way my legs trembled as I pushed a mop down endless hallways. I'd come home just before dawn, peel off my uniform and crawl into bed beside him, only to be woken minutes later by his tiny hand tugging at my sleeve, asking for breakfast. There were weeks when the rent was due, the fridge was empty, and I had to choose. Feed myself or feed him. I always chose him. I'd boil rice and stretch it for days, pretending I wasn't hungry so he could eat. Some nights my stomach growled so loud it echoed in the silence, but I told myself it didn't matter. His little belly was full. That was all I needed. School supplies, I'd pick up extra shifts. His first bike? I pawned the only piece of jewelry I had left from my mother. Every Christmas, I'd stay up late sewing or scrimping together enough money to buy him something that would make him smile. And oh, how he smiled back then. A smile so wide and pure it made every sacrifice worth it. I remember one winter when the heater broke in our tiny apartment. The cold seeped through the walls, and I wrapped him in blankets, pulling him close to me in bed to keep him warm. My breath fogged in the air as I whispered bedtime stories, pretending we were camping under the stars, just so he wouldn't know how bad things really were. That night, my body shivered so violently I thought I might break apart, but I never let go of him. He slept peacefully, trusting me to keep him safe. And then there were the school years, the endless parent-teacher conferences, the projects that needed supplies I couldn't afford, the field trips that cost more than I had in my pocket. Still, I found a way. I clipped coupons, skipped haircuts, patched the same shoes over and over so he'd have what he needed. Sometimes I stood in line at the grocery store, counting coins in my hand, praying the bill wouldn't be higher than what I had. And when it was, I'd quietly put back something for myself. Bread, milk, sometimes even medicine. Because he came first. Always. There's one memory I can never shake. He must have been around 9 years old. He came home from school, eyes bright, holding a flyer for a science fair. "Mom," he said, "I need a poster board and markers. Can we get them tonight?" I smiled and said yes, even though my wallet was almost empty. That night, after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. I didn't know how I'd pay for it. The next day, I skipped lunch and used the money to buy his supplies. When he won second place at that fair, holding up his ribbon with pride, I knew it had all been worth it. But sacrifices weren't just about money. They were about time, energy, pieces of myself I'll never get back. I missed sleep. I missed opportunities. I missed the chance to live for me. There were times when other women my age were going out, building careers, traveling, falling in love. But not me. My life was my son. My joy came from his laughter. My dreams became his future. So when I sat in that room on his birthday, watching him laugh with friends who hadn't walked a single mile in my shoes, hearing him say that the best gift I could give him was to disappear, those words cut deeper than a knife. Because he wasn't just asking me to leave his party. He was asking me to erase everything. To make invisible the nights I worked until my hands bled. The days I went hungry so he could eat. The years I poured myself out so he could stand tall. He wanted me gone, like I had never existed, and that's why it hurt so deeply. Because for me, he was my whole existence. From the moment I first held him in my arms, I stopped living for myself and started living for him. Every scar, every wrinkle, every ache in my body told the story of how much I had given. And yet, in his eyes that night, it meant nothing. That's what people don't understand. A mother's love doesn't keep score. We don't add up the hours we've worked or the meals we've skipped or the tears we've shed. We just give and we give and we give. Because that's what it means to be a mother. But when that love is thrown back in your face, when the child you sacrificed everything for looks at you like you're nothing, the pain is almost unbearable. As I stood outside that night, breathing in the cold air, I thought about all those years. The rocking chair, the empty fridge, the field trips, the broken heater, the nights of hunger. I thought about the promises I had whispered to him when he was too young to understand. I'll always be here. I'll never leave you. And now, on his birthday, he had looked me in the eye and wished me away. It felt like my sacrifices had been erased in a single moment. But deep down beneath the ache in my chest, another feeling stirred. A strength I had built through all those struggles. The strength of a woman who had survived everything life threw at her and still kept going. And though his words broke me, they also reminded me of who I really was. A mother who had carried the weight of the world for her son. And so, with that strength, I decided, I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not remind him of what I had done. My silence would speak louder than any words I could ever say. Because the truth was, his words may have cut me deeply, but they could never erase my love. They could never erase the years of sacrifice. They could never erase me. I can still hear his voice echoing in my head, clear as glass, sharp as a blade. My son, the child I had raised with my own 2 hands, the one I had carried through storms and hunger, the boy who once whispered, "Don't ever leave me, Mama," looked around that crowded room and said with a smirk on his face, "The best gift my mother could ever give me is to finally disappear from my life." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. His tone carried no hesitation, no nervous laugh to soften the blow. He said it with certainty, as though it had been sitting on his tongue for years, waiting for the perfect moment to fall into the open. He didn't just want me gone, he wanted everyone to know it. The room froze. For one long, suffocating second, I thought maybe I had misheard him. Maybe my ears, tired from years of worry and strain, had twisted his words into something crueler than they were. But then I saw the faces around me. His friends shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between me and him like they weren't sure whether to laugh or stay silent. A few let out short, uneasy chuckles, as if afraid of being the only ones not to join in on the joke. Others smirked, whispering behind their hands, like this was some kind of punchline at my expense. And his wife, oh, I will never forget her expression. She didn't even try to hide her delight. She pressed her manicured fingers to her lips, pretending to be shocked, but the sparkle in her eyes told the truth. She was enjoying every second of it. In that moment, I wasn't just his mother to her. I was an obstacle finally being shoved aside, a reminder of where he came from, something she believed didn't belong in their polished, perfect little world. I sat there, my hands gripping the small box in my lap so tightly I thought I might crush it. The watch inside, his father's watch, the last gift I had to give him, pressed against my palms like a secret I wasn't allowed to share. My throat ached, my chest tightened, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there in front of them all. But then, the whispers started. They say mothers never let go. Maybe she's always been too controlling. No wonder he wants some space. Their voices slithered through the air, not loud but sharp enough for me to hear. Strangers, friends, family, people who had never seen me patch shoes late at night, who had never seen me stretch a single meal into 2 just so he wouldn't go hungry. Suddenly they all had an opinion about who I was and what I deserved. And my son? He just smiled. He didn't take it back. He didn't say it was a joke. He let their whispers grow louder, allowed their laughter to bloom, and with every second that passed, I could feel the distance between us widen until it was an unbridgeable canyon. Inside me, 2 voices battled. One screamed with rage. "Stand up! Tell them the truth. Tell them about the nights you starved so he could eat, the hours you worked so he could have shoes on his feet. Make him remember." But the other voice, quieter, steadier, whispered, "No, don't give them your tears, don't give them your anger. You are not here to beg for love you already gave in full. You are a mother, and mothers know when silence speaks louder than words." I closed my eyes for the briefest moment and listened to that second voice. My heart was broken. No, shattered. But I would not let them see me crumble. My son may have wished me gone, but I would leave on my own terms with my head held high. When I opened my eyes, I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for just a flicker of a second, Behind the pride in his smile and the laughter on his lips, I thought I saw something else. Maybe it was hesitation. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was nothing at all. Just the desperate hope of a mother trying to find love in a place where it no longer lived. I pressed my lips into a thin line, steadying myself. My chest felt hollow, as though my ribs had been scraped clean. Every word he had spoken replayed again and again in my mind. Disappear from my life. That's the best gift you could give me. Each time it cut deeper. Each time it twisted the knife. But still, I chose dignity. I rose from my chair slowly, carefully, as though I had all the time in the world. The room grew quiet, all eyes following me. Maybe they expected me to shout. Maybe they thought I would fall to my knees and beg him to take it back. But I would not give them that satisfaction. I walked across the room, the box still clutched in my hands. My heels tapped against the polished floor, echoing louder than the music that had started playing again, desperate to fill the silence my son had created. I reached the gift table, placed the box gently among the others, and smoothed my dress as though nothing in the world was wrong. And then I turned. I didn't look at the faces watching me. I didn't glance at my son. I just walked toward the door, my back straight, my chin high. Inside, I was crumbling. Inside, every step felt like a goodbye to the boy I once knew. Inside, I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. But on the outside, I was silent. And in that silence, I found a strange kind of power. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is nothing at all. No tears, no words, just a quiet exit that leaves them wondering what storm you carry inside. And as I opened the door and stepped into the night, leaving behind the laughter, the whispers, and the cruel words that had been etched into my heart, I made a decision. If he believed the best gift I could give him was to disappear, then I would give him exactly that. Not as a punishment, not as revenge, but as a mother who knew that sometimes the only way to keep your dignity is to walk away. The moment my hand touched the doorknob, it felt as though the entire room behind me dissolved into nothing but a dull hum. Laughter still rang out, glasses still clinked, music still played. But none of it reached me. It was all muffled, like I was underwater, drifting away from a world that no longer wanted me. I stepped out into the night, and the cold air wrapped itself around me like a blanket. Sharp, biting, yet strangely comforting. I closed the door softly behind me, letting it latch without a sound. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of hearing it slam. A slammed door says anger. A quiet door says control. And control was the only thing I had left. For a long moment, I stood there on the porch, staring out at the dark street lit by the glow of street lamps. Cars lined the curb, their windows reflecting bits of light, like watchful eyes. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, and the faint rustle of leaves whispered in the wind. It was a normal night for the world outside, but inside me, something monumental had shifted. Sadness pressed down on me like a heavy weight, settling deep into my bones. My chest ached with every breath. This wasn't just any goodbye. This was the kind of goodbye that carved itself into your soul. A final bow in a play I had never agreed to perform. Yet even through the sadness, something else stirred. Something quiet. Something steady. Strength. It wasn't the kind of strength that roared or demanded attention. No, this strength was softer, quieter, like the steel spine of a woman who has already weathered countless storms. I had survived poverty. I had survived loneliness. I had survived raising a child on my own. And now, I would survive this too. I walked slowly down the steps, my heels clicking against the concrete. Each step echoed in the stillness of the night, marking my departure in steady rhythm. Click, click, click. I imagined each sound as a drumbeat, leading me away from the place where my heart had been broken for the final time. As I reached the sidewalk, I paused and looked back at the house. Through the window, I could still see the glow of lights, shadows moving as people laughed and celebrated. I imagined him inside, surrounded by friends, his arm draped around his wife, his smile wide. Maybe he felt relief knowing I was gone. Maybe he thought he had finally freed himself from the woman who had given him life. And that's when the words he had spoken replayed again in my mind. The best gift you could ever give me is to disappear from my life. I whispered them softly to myself, tasting their bitterness. And then, under my breath, I answered, if disappearing is what he wants, so be it. It wasn't resignation. It wasn't defeat. It was resolve. A promise to myself that I would not beg, not return, not force my presence where it wasn't wanted. He had made his wish clear, and I had granted it. But deep inside, I knew. Wishes have consequences, and sometimes the things we ask for come back to haunt us in ways we never imagined. I turned away from the house and began walking down the street. The night air stung my cheeks, but I welcomed it. Each step away from that house felt like shedding a layer of grief, even as the weight of betrayal still pressed hard against my chest. My mind wandered as I walked. I thought of the boy he once was, the one who clutched my hand so tightly when crossing the street, afraid to let go. I thought of the nights he crawled into my bed after a nightmare, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mama." And now here I was, leaving. Not because I wanted to, but because he had asked for it. Because he had demanded it. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. My tears would not belong to the cold pavement or the indifferent stars above. They were mine to keep, locked away where no one could use them against me. Instead, I let silence be my companion. The silence of the empty street. The silence of my footsteps. The silence of a mother who had given everything and received nothing in return. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't stay empty for long. It grows, it thickens, it begins to hum with possibility. And as I walked further from that house, the silence around me began to carry a strange weight, almost like anticipation. Something was coming. I didn't know what, not yet. But deep inside, my instincts whispered that this story wasn't finished. Life has a way of turning tables when you least expect it. And as much as my son believed he had cast me aside, I sensed that fate had something else in store. Maybe it was a mother's intuition. Maybe it was just wishful thinking. But I felt it, the tension in the air, the way the night seemed to hold its breath. I didn't know it then, but within an hour, the world inside that house would be turned upside down. And the same son who wished me gone would face a reckoning he could never have imagined. I reached the end of the block and stopped, glancing once more over my shoulder. The house was still glowing, still alive with celebration, as though nothing had changed. But I knew the truth. Everything had changed. Not just for me, but for him too. I whispered a final thought to myself. This is my silent goodbye, but silence is never the end. It's only the pause before something greater begins. And with that, I walked into the night, carrying both my sadness and my strength, unaware of the storm that was already gathering, ready to break over my son's perfect little world. It hadn't even been an hour since I left his house. The sting of his words was still fresh in my chest, echoing like a cruel melody I couldn't silence. I sat in my car down the street, the engine off, my hands resting quietly on the steering wheel. I wasn't ready to drive away just yet. Something in me wanted one last look, one last moment to collect myself before I disappeared from his life as he wished. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just the flicker of red and blue in the distance, faint, then growing stronger. The unmistakable flash of police lights bouncing off the walls of the neighborhood. My heart skipped a beat, not out of fear for myself, but with a strange curiosity. The sound followed, sirens, low and steady, echoing through the quiet street. And then, those lights stopped, right in front of his house. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. 2 police cars pulled up, their tires crunching against the pavement. The doors swung open and officers stepped out with purpose, their faces set in grim determination. They didn't hesitate. They didn't circle the block. They headed straight for his front door. Neighbors began peeking out from their windows. Curtains shifted. Front doors creaked open. People whispered to one another. Confusion etched across their faces. It was the kind of moment that transforms an ordinary night into a spectacle. The kind of moment that would soon be replayed in hushed conversations for weeks to come. I sat still, my eyes locked on the scene. My son's birthday party, the same one where I had been humiliated, where I had been asked to vanish, was about to take a turn none of them could have imagined. The music inside continued for a moment longer. Muffled thuds of bass against the walls. Laughter spilled out each time the front door opened as guests came and went. But then, the knock came. A heavy, authoritative knock that cut through the night like thunder. Bang, bang, bang. The sound silenced the neighborhood. It silenced me. Even the music inside seemed to falter, as though the walls themselves understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. The door opened slowly, and there he was, my son, my boy, standing in the doorway, still wearing the smug smile from his party, a drink in hand. His laughter faded the moment he saw the uniforms. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. He tried to straighten himself, to play the role of the man in control, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. "Is there a problem, officers?" he asked, his voice sharp, defensive. The lead officer didn't waste a second. He read his name out loud, his full name, and said the words that dropped like stones into the night. "You're under arrest." Gasps erupted from the doorway. Guests crowded behind him, their faces pale, their hands covering their mouths. His wife stumbled forward, stammering, "There must be some mistake. This is ridiculous." Neighbors from across the street gathered closer, whispering, their eyes wide with disbelief. I watched it all from the shadows, hidden in my car, my heart pounding with a mixture of sorrow and something else, something I couldn't quite name. The officers moved quickly. They asked him to put down his drink. He hesitated, glanced back at the crowd behind him, then at his wife, as if expecting someone to intervene, to save him. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was deafening. And then, they pulled his arms behind his back. The click of handcuffs echoed louder than any laughter, louder than any cruel word he had spoken earlier. In that single sound, the arrogance drained from his face. His smile vanished. His eyes darted wildly, searching the crowd, searching for someone, anyone, to help him. But no one did. His wife's bravado crumbled, her tears streaming as she shouted protests that fell on deaf ears. His friends looked away, their nervous laughter gone, their shoulders hunched with shame. The neighbors whispered louder now, their voices a mixture of shock and judgment. And me? I just sat there watching. I didn't smile, I didn't cry. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge nor the bitterness of anger. What I felt was something deeper, something heavier. The quiet recognition that life has a way of delivering consequences far swifter and harsher than we ever could. Karma had knocked on his door, wearing a badge and carrying handcuffs. I thought of his words again. "The best gift you could ever give me is to disappear from my life." Well, I had disappeared. And now, standing in his doorway with his hands cuffed behind his back, surrounded by flashing lights and whispers, he was the one disappearing. Not into freedom, but into the custody of the very world he thought he was above. They led him down the steps, past the shocked faces of his guests, past his wife's trembling hands, past neighbors who now had front row seats to his downfall. The man who had mocked me, the son who had asked me to erase myself, now looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not the proud host, not the successful man, not the arrogant son. Just a boy caught in a storm of his own making. As the officers placed him into the back of the police car, his eyes lifted for just a moment. For a fleeting second, I thought they might meet mine. Maybe he felt me there in the shadows. Maybe he sensed that even in this moment, I was still present, still watching, still carrying the weight of being his mother. But if he saw me, he didn't show it. The car door shut with a hollow thud, sealing his fate. The lights spun faster, the sirens wailed again, and just like that, they drove him away. The street fell silent in their absence. The neighbors retreated into their homes, murmuring to each other. Guests trickled out of the house, their faces pale, their voices hushed. His wife stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaking her face, clutching at the frame like it was the only thing holding her up. And me? I remained in my car, unmoving, staring at the space where the red and blue lights had just been. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. After all, hadn't he wished me away? And yet here I was, still standing, while he was the one being taken from his own home, from his own party, in front of the very people he had tried to impress. But triumph never came. Instead, I felt the strange calm of inevitability, as though the universe had simply balanced the scales on its own. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to seek revenge. All I had to do was walk away, and life took care of the rest. For years, I had carried the weight of sacrifice, of struggle, of silence, and in this moment, I realized silence is not weakness. Silence has its own power, because sometimes silence is the space where fate does its work. So I sat there, breathing slowly, letting the calm settle into me. My son had wanted me gone, and now, in a way, he was the one who was gone, taken away, not by my hand, but by his own choices. And as I finally started my car and drove away, I whispered to myself, karma knocked on his door tonight, and I didn't even have to answer it. A mother's love is not a fleeting thing. It is endless, boundless, and deeper than any wound words could ever carve. I carried my son in my arms when he was fragile. I carried him in my heart when he grew strong, and even when he asked me to disappear, I still carried him in my soul. But love does not erase consequence. Disrespect does not come without cost. The way you treat the person who raised you, who sacrificed for you, will always echo back, louder than you expect, sooner than you imagine. As I watched him taken away in handcuffs, I did not feel triumph. I felt sorrow, because no mother dreams of seeing her child fall. Yet in that moment, I also felt clarity. He had made his choice and life had answered. So let this be the lesson. Never turn your back on the one who gave you everything, because one day, when you need them most, they may no longer be there. He wanted me gone. But life had other plans.